Hello everyone, and welcome to the lecture on subplots. So far we have seen how we can draw graphs. In this lecture we'll see how we can draw subplots. Okay, Matplotlib has a method called subplots, and by calling this method and passing values we can draw subplots. So for instance, we can call Matplotlib subplot method and pass the values, let's say 211. This basically means the first value is the number of rows, the second value is the number of columns, and the third value is our figure number. So here 211 means number of rows is 2, number of columns is 1, and our figure number is 1. Another way of writing this is 2, 1, 1. So you can use both ways and it's fine. So in literature you might find subplot 2, 1, 1, or this is commonly used 2, 1, 1. I don't want to go into the details, but if the values for your number of rows times the number of columns is less than 10, you can use this method without any comma. But if you are going to have lots of subplots, you need to use the comma separated value. Okay, now that we saw those values, let's go ahead and do a couple of subplots. So I'll start by calling the subplot method and then pass the number of rows, columns, and our figure number. So we'll pass 211. If you haven't imported Matplotlib and NumPy and Pandas, please do so. I have already imported this in the previous lecture. Okay, next let's define our x and y values. I'll be using the same cosine and sine function. So I'll call NumPy's line space method and then pass values from, let's say, -10 to 10, and I want to use 150 points. You can use any points that you want. And for my y-axis, I'll call NumPy's cosine function. So np that cos of x. Okay, and let's define our sine function here also. So we'll call NumPy sine function. Okay, so here we have plt.subplot. Once we call our subplot method and have our x and y values, we can simply call the plot function. So here I'll call Matplotlib's plot function and pass the x and y values for our function. So x, and for our y value we'll use this cosine, and let's pass a color of red or any color that you want, and line width let's use 2.4. so this will be our first figure. Okay, and for our second figure we need to call the subplot method again and then pass 212 in this case. So number of rows is 2, number of columns is 1, and then this will be our figure number, right? So our first figure number and our second figure number, and then we'll simply call the plot method and then pass x, the sine function here for our y variable, and for color let's use green, and line width let's use 3.4. Now let me run it and show you the result. So here we have our first subplot and our second subplot. So number of rows is 2 and number of columns is 1. So number of rows means this is the first row and this is the second row. And number of columns is 1, of course. We only have 1 row, right? So depending on what we specify here, we can have multiple columns or rows as we specify. And we can call Matplotlib's figure method and then pass the fig size attribute as we have seen before. And let's say 10 by 5. Run it again. Oh, we have an error. I know what the error is. We forgot the equal sign here. Let's run it again. Okay. Looks much better. Here we have our first subplot and our second subplot. The first one is for cosine of x. Second one is x versus sine of x. Right? And if you want to change the number of rows and columns, you can do that also. Let me copy the whole thing, paste it here, and say, so instead of 2 1 1, I'll make it 1 row and 2 columns, so 1 to 1 for our first subplot, and for our second subplot I'll make it 1 to 2. So this means 1 row and we'll have 2 columns. Okay, so instead of the 2 subplots, one underneath the other, it will be adjacent. So now when we run this, we'll have adjacent subplots, right? We have that, and we can call the figure attribute and the figure method and pass the fig size attribute and adjust it to whatever we want. Okay, you already know how to do that. So this is what the numbers in our subplot specify: number of rows, columns, and our figure number. There is also another method known as access. We can call this access method and specify what location that we want, and we can do this manually. So what we do is, let me paste our whole method here, and then so replace the subplot method with access. Okay, so we have plt.access, and for our second subplot method here, plt.access. And what we need to do is, this access attribute takes one of the following values. It takes the values left, width, bottom, and height. So we have left, bottom, width, and height. So these are the 4 attributes that the access method takes. And by passing these attributes, you can adjust where your graphs will be, where your plots will be. Okay, let's see an example. So plt.access, and then we need to pass these values as a list. Let's try values 1, 1.2, 1, and 1. And for our second plt.access, let me simply pass 1, 1, 1, 1. So based on what we specify for these values, we manually place these plots. So let me run it and show you. Okay, it kind of overlaps. Let's change the values for our access method. Let me put, let's say 0.2, 1, 1, and 1. Let me run it again. Okay, looks much better. What if I change this to, let's say, negative 0.4 maybe? Okay, so here I have our 2 graphs now. So the first one, location is negative 0.4 from the left, and 1 inch from the bottom, and then width and height is 1, and the second one is I have passed values of 1, 1, 1, 1. That's from the left bottom, width and height. Okay, so from the left, from the bottom, and the width and height of your plots. So you can change this to different values and see the result you get. I just wanted to quickly show you the access method. Okay, so you can change the values for the access method and see what you get. For instance, if I make those changes, oh, this should be 1.2, not 1,2. Let me run it again. You see how the height and width change? Yeah, you can do that and play around with this and see what you come up with. This is what I have for the lecture. Just to summarize, Matplotlib has a method known as subplot, and by passing the number of rows, columns, and figure number, we can have or draw different subplots. Thank you everyone, and I'll see you at the next lecture.